Our closing plenary speaker reminds us that healing and resilience are built not only through services and systems, but also through connection, creativity, and community. It's my privilege to introduce Brian Jenkins, Chief Executive Officer of the Armed Services Arts Partnership, or ASAP. Under Brian's leadership, ASAP has grown into the nation's largest military arts community, empowering veterans, service members, military spouses, and their families through the arts. His work has demonstrated that creativity can foster belonging, reduce isolation, and help people move from surviving to thriving. Before Brian joins us on stage, we'd like to share a brief video introducing the remarkable work of the Armed Services Arts Partnership. Please direct your attention to the screens.
It takes courage. With every step, you feel how badly you want to turn back. You don't realize how much anxiety you carry in your stomach. And yet, you want this. Hey everybody, how y'all feeling tonight? See, back in World War II, the military brought stages right up behind the front lines. Soldiers would write and perform shows in tents and bombed out hangars, sometimes just a few miles from combat. It wasn't about pretending the war wasn't happening. It was about holding on to something human in the middle of it. You want to talk about courage? Legendary entertainer Bob Hope covered 80,000 miles in World War II. Bases, ships, airfields worldwide. He literally created modern stand-up comedy, and he used it to bring troops a piece of home and a bit of hope in brutal war zones. Art, comedy, laughter in service of service members. Sound familiar?
ASAP just appeared at the perfect time for me. I've met some of my best friends here. Veterans, spouses, family members, caregivers. You show up and you belong. We write together, we perform together, we grow as artists together.
But it was a great movie. Best movie ever. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
I don't like
We lean on each other through all of it. The lighter days and the impossibly heavy ones.
We're still trying to get a diagnosis. She's been having a lot of challenges, and so it's been a little difficult.
I can't believe that just making things will change who I am in a second, and I can leave all the junk in my mind behind. Military life comes with a lot of challenges. I suffer from post-traumatic stress syndrome, and I'm also an MST survivor. It's difficult. Your day doesn't start like everybody else's. It's something that I deal with physically, mentally, emotionally, every day. When I'm doing art of any kind, it's like a door unlocks and lets me in. And all of my challenges, all of my hurts, all of the different things I work with and deal with in my life are left outside the art door. Hey, babe. Are you having a good time? Art has a way of reaching you when nothing else does.
These are my people. I'm not giving them up for anything.
It feels like every year I make a new, really close friend in ASAP. When ASAP walks into a room, that place becomes a community.
I found ASAP looking online.
That's why I did ASAP. You can still have that community. A lot of really wonderful things with ASAP.
On December 19th, 1944, a 22-year-old Army private from Indianapolis surrendered to German forces in the Ardennes forest. He was an intelligence scout, and his regiment had been surrounded for 3 days. The Germans packed him and 6,000 other American soldiers into boxcars and shipped them into enemy territory as prisoners of war. He ended up in Dresden, where 2 months later he survived the firebombing of that city in a meat locker, 2 stories underground beneath a slaughterhouse. When he came up, the city was gone, and he spent the following weeks pulling bodies out of the rubble. He came home in 1945, and it took him 23 years to write down what he experienced. And then, after 23 years, Kurt Vonnegut finished writing Slaughterhouse-Five. In the 2 decades between the meat locker and the manuscript, he was not idle. He published 5 novels and dozens of short stories when he failed over and over, by his own account, to write this particular story, his own story. And it makes me wonder, what took him so long? What pieces was he missing? History and legacy matter so much to the communities that we are talking about serving today. And despite the youth of our organization, ASAP, having only just celebrated our first decade of impact, we too think a lot about legacy and history and the shoulders that we stand upon. So of course we cherish Vonnegut's legacy. After coming home from the war, Vonnegut became one of the most celebrated writers, humorists, satirists of the 20th century. And he said, "To practice any art, no matter how well or badly, is a way to make your soul grow. So do it." Another legacy we cherish is that of legendary entertainer Bob Hope, whose career spanned every major form of entertainment in the 20th century, who pioneered the art form of stand-up comedy and was most famous for using it to lift the spirits of American service members all around the world, starting in World War II. He covered 80,000 miles in that conflict, sometimes performing 5 or 7 shows a day. He was an unstoppable force, and the thing that drove him forward was the joy and the relief that he saw on the faces of the service members he visited with and performed for. He saw what a laugh can do. And finally, a third legacy that inspires us is that of the soldier shows, or the blueprint specials as they were called in World War II. A forgotten history and a wide-ranging effort that got service members up on stage performing for one another, sometimes just behind the front lines. There were musicals, plays, sketch comedy shows, and performing arts contests, all as a way to build unit cohesion, troop morale, and combat readiness. That's a direct quote from the archives. I find this legacy incredibly inspiring. But let's get back to Vonnegut. Vonnegut was born in Indianapolis on November 11th, 1922, Armistice Day, which later became Veterans Day, and that irony wasn't lost on him. He wrote about it his whole life. He went to Shortridge High School, where he wrote for the Daily Echo, the first daily high school newspaper in the country. He always said that paper truly taught him to write because he wasn't writing for a teacher. He was writing for his classmates. He was writing for people who would tell him if it was any good. He went to college to study chemistry mostly because his dad and his brother told him to, and then he enlisted in 1943. The Army sent him to study mechanical engineering, but pretty soon the war needed guys with rifles a lot more than it needed engineers, and they put him in the infantry, and they shipped him off. But before he shipped out, he was stationed at Camp Atterbury, just 40 minutes south of here, close enough to come home on the weekends. He went to Europe as a scout with the 423rd Regiment, the 106th Infantry Division. They arrived at the front in December 1944, and they were handed a quiet stretch of the Ardennes, a place for them to get their feet under them, a new division, a new brigade, just to get their feet under them. But on December 16th, the Germans launched the offensive that we now call the Battle of the Bulge, and they launched it directly onto the 106th Infantry Division. 2 of the division's 3 regiments were cut off and encircled. They tried to counterattack, but they were blocked. And on December 19th, they were forced to surrender. Vonnegut wrote about it plainly. Everyone on their flanks managed to get out, but his unit was told to stay and fight. And bayonets, Vonnegut said, weren't much use against tanks. He was marched, loaded onto a boxcar, and taken to Dresden. and the prisoners were housed in a converted slaughterhouse. On the night of February 13th, 1945, Allied air forces firebombed the city. Vonnegut and his fellow POWs were taken down into the meat locker underground, and that's what saved them. From below ground, they listened to the roar of bombs dropping above their heads, and when they came up the next morning, the city was gone. The Germans put them to work for weeks. American prisoners went into cellars and shelters to recover those who were lost in the bombing, and eventually there were too many to bury. Vonnegut was 22 years old when he went through this. Soviet troops liberated Dresden in May 1945, and he came home. The army gave him a Purple Heart, which he actually mocked and joked about for the rest of his life. He called it a ludicrously negligible wound, and he joked that he got it for frostbite. Those of us who know these communities and work with these communities, you know that joke. You've probably heard a version of that joke this week. A man who watched a city burn and went through some of the most brutal things that a human being can see. He gets a medal, and the first thing he does is he makes a joke about it. Dark humor is a survival mechanism in the military community and in the first responder community, and it's often the first step to be able to talk about these experiences and what they do to a person. So he got home in 1945, and he had all of the material. He told people he was going to write the Dresden book. His family and friends waited on it for 2 decades, but he could not do it. He wrote Player Piano, The Sirens of Titan, Mother Night, Cat's Cradle, God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater, dozens of short stories to pay the bills. He was working the entire time. And Slaughterhouse-Five came out in 1969, 23 years. He didn't lack talent, he didn't lack time, he didn't lack motivation. By any measure we would use in this intake, he was a high-functioning individual with resources. But it seems that what he lacked was a certain set of conditions. And I want to name what that means for the people in this room because I think delay is a central design problem in a lot of our work. Our systems are built to respond to a presenting problem, but too often these populations do not present. The veteran, the officer, the firefighter, the medic, the whole professional identity is around being the person other people call, not the person who calls. So when we build a service and then we measure whether people use it, we're frequently measuring the wrong thing. We're measuring whether our front door was knockable for someone who has trained their whole life, their whole career, not to knock. When we launched ASAP's chapter in Indiana back in 2021, we started with our comedy boot camp class, a 7-week stand-up comedy class where 12 veterans and 2 instructors over 7 weeks master the art of stand-up comedy. At the end of that class, they get up under the bright lights in a dark room at their local comedy club, and they perform their first tight 5 for a couple hundred of their closest friends and neighbors. After he took that class and joined our community, one of our first Indiana Comedy Bootcamp alumni, Chris, put it to me this way. He had gotten out of the Marine Corps more than 20 years prior, but his class with ASAP was the first time he finally felt like he had come home. So when it comes to Vonnegut, I think the 23 years might be how long it takes when you're missing what ASAP gave to Chris. Vonnegut actually spends much of the first chapter of Slaughterhouse-Five talking about this. He explains how he was finally able to write the book. First, he became part of a creative community. In 1965, he was living on Cape Cod, largely unknown, and his books were out of print. He took a 2-year job at the Iowa's Writers' Workshop, mostly because he needed the money. And so for the first time in his life, he was immersed in a community of other writers. Possibly also for the first time in his life, he was expected to talk about writing. And he started the Dresden novel there. Second, he dug in with someone who got it. Vonnegut had a friendship with a fellow veteran named Bernard O'Hare. Same regiment, same day that they were captured, locked in the same slaughterhouse. And when he was finally ready, Vonnegut visited his friend O'Hare at his home in Pennsylvania to sit at the kitchen table, look at old war photos, and together reconstruct their memories of what they each went through. And here's a detail that will be very familiar to every clinician in the room. O'Hare couldn't remember much of it either. 2 men sitting at a kitchen table trying to assemble one usable memory between them. Then Vonnegut received a fellowship in 1967 that enabled him to go back to Dresden and actually take O'Hare with him. They found the slaughterhouse. They made friends with the cab driver who drove them there, whose mother had actually died in the firebombing. Someone funded a veteran to go back to the worst place he'd ever been with the one person who could corroborate it. Before that trip, Vonnegut went to O'Hare's house in Pennsylvania one more time for another visit. O'Hare's wife, Mary, was cold and standoffish to him, and he couldn't figure out why, so he just asked her. She was angry because she was sure that he was going to write a war book that made war look glamorous, that there would be a part in it for Frank Sinatra or John Wayne, and that other people's children would read the book and war would keep happening. And she told him something that he hadn't been able to see yet, that he and O'Hare had been kids at war, 22 years old, children. He raised his right hand and promised Mary the book would have no part for Frank Sinatra or John Wayne, and that he would call it The Children's Crusade. That is, in fact, the subtitle of Slaughterhouse-Five, and the book is dedicated to Mary. Mary gave Vonnegut a reframe that allowed him to deftly and simultaneously reject the oversimplified hero narrative that we often see. She also helped him reject the victim narrative that we too often see, that victim of the broken veteran. Instead, he could tell the story with strength in owning his story and self-compassion for the brutality that he went through. This is what Vonnegut tells us unlocked his story that he couldn't get out for 23 years. A community, a person who got it, who he could talk with and really dig into those experiences with, support, funding, permission to go dig into that story, and breaking out of those oversimplified narratives. This is what unlocked the most important American war novel of the 20th century. And he assembled these things by accident over a period of 23 years. And I'd like to suggest that we can actually build these things on purpose. And we've actually done it before at scale and then sort of forgot we did. So let's get back to those soldier shows. The United States Special Services Division packaged the whole thing and shipped it worldwide. They published detailed manuals on acting, writing, directing, creating sets from scraps, and even making paper wigs and doing stage makeup with pencils. You saw some of the images in the video. They set it up so that any unit, anywhere, could stage a show out of scraps, and the program was so popular that the writers back stateside couldn't churn out scripts fast enough. Military leaders saw a direct connection between combat fright and stage fright, believing that this fearsome act of getting up on stage and performing would not only bond soldiers more tightly together as a unit, but it would give them courage, resilience, adaptability, and that would translate to success on the battlefield. They also knew that these shows would get their minds into a completely different space, a spirit of play, an escape from the brutality of war, a creative act in the midst of destruction, one that would build up morale and well-being. General Dwight D. Eisenhower himself is on the record praising these soldier shows, talking to a group of service members who had just finished a show in North Africa, telling them how vital he believed it to be for his troops' well-being. Most Americans don't know about this history, but there are clues in our culture. I'm curious, how many of you have seen the movie White Christmas? That's the majority of the room. Can you remember the opening scene or the closing scene of that movie? The entire thing actually hinges on this program. I see some nods in the room. It opens with a soldier show in Europe as bombs are exploding in the background. And once they're back home, the soldiers go through enormous effort to show gratitude to their commanding officer who supported them in their soldier shows and whom they loved so much. And after they come home and return to civilian life, to show what he meant to them, what do? They put on one more show, the biggest one yet, the most extravagant performance that they can do. That's a movie made in 1954 in part by the people who lived it. Some observations for us. If a group of modern mental health professionals were to look at the Soldier Show program today, we might call it an innovative, non-clinical, non-traditional intervention before we had those terms. Thankfully, we're in an era where we're becoming a lot more supportive of a variety of approaches to address mental health challenges, clinical and non-clinical, traditional and non-traditional, from equine-assisted services to arts to psychedelics and beyond, many of these things we've talked about today. And so many of these efforts that we call innovative or non-traditional are actually well documented and have been widely practiced in our history. Even something as new and emerging as psychedelics is actually building upon thousands of years of practice across a wide variety of indigenous cultures around the world. And so what I take from that is this. We can and must refine these practices, evaluate our programs, add to the evidence base, and sharpen our understanding of outcomes. But we should also recognize that a lot of these ideas aren't new, we're just making them new again. So when we hear from, so another thing I notice about this also is that this was a program initiated, designed, funded, implemented, and evaluated by the United States government, which I take as a reminder that government is capable of building, testing, and innovating valuable solutions whether or not we hear about it. So when we do hear from leaders like Senator Kreider, Representative Wilburn, Mayor Jensen, and Director Adams about their efforts to fund mental health programs, to be willing to innovate, that work is building on a real and impactful legacy that we can be good at. And it matters that we put public dollars into this work and that we prioritize it, local, state, and federal. After the war, the Soldier Show program was shut down, and that infrastructure was effectively lost. So for the last 70 years, those materials have mostly spent their time gathering dust in boxes at the National Archives. There's one person who has actually been excavating that history, though. This person wrote her PhD in this history, and this person is now ASAP's National Program Director. She did this whole PhD, this whole dissertation before I ever met her, before she even worked for ASAP. And she spent a lot of time looking through those boxes. When she was writing her dissertation, also before we met, she actually was interviewing several of our alumni for her research and wrote several pages in her introduction about our work, beautifully speaking about our impact and how it connects to this history. So when she applied to work for us and attached that as her writing sample, I just about lost my mind and I had to hire her. These programs happened 70 years ago. And now there's ASAP. We think very critically about the lessons that we can take away from this history and all of these histories. One, the uniform is often an identity, which means that separation, retirement, or medical retirement is often a brutal transition. You don't just lose the work, you lose the purpose, you lose the community, you lose the camaraderie, you lose the sense of identity, all in the same week. So for us, the room that we create has to be one full of peers. When a veteran walks into an ASAP classroom, they can exhale and know that they're gonna feel understood. Our classes are typically 12 veterans and military family members together for 7 weeks, which means nobody spends any energy translating. No one has to explain what a deployment did to their marriage or why they still choose the seat that faces the door. What Bernard O'Hare gave Vonnegut at that kitchen table was validation and corroboration. He was somebody in the room who didn't need the context filled in for him. And I think that's what Chris was describing when he said a comedy class was the first time he felt like he had finally come home. Second, the help that could save you is also the help that could disqualify you. For fit for duty evaluations, clearances, assignment decisions, a room with an intake form and a diagnosis is also a room where you can be found unfit for the work that shapes your life. That is stigma. And we've talked about stigma today. But I think it goes a little bit beyond that. I think it's actually a rational risk calculation that those in uniform feel they have to make in order to keep doing the work that they love. So for us at ASAP, we built a non-clinical front door. Ours is a class, not a clinic. No intake, no diagnosis, and it is not therapy. You come to learn a skill. You come to make friends. You come to do something that's gonna scare the crap out of you, and it's free. But also, 67% of our participants have a service-related disability. And so that non-clinical door is reaching a clinically significant population. The lower the threshold, the earlier they will walk through it. And to be very clear, this is complementary to clinical care, not a replacement for it. And we have to think very carefully, wherever we are on that continuum of clinic to community, how we can all build up those structures and refer in both directions. Third, this experience is one that is cumulative, not a single event, both for the challenges and for the solutions. Too often, we organize interventions around a specific trauma that happened. A paramedic doesn't have one of those. They have 400 of those, layered over 15 years, most of which never registered as a crisis on the specific day that it happened. You just move on. There's a lot of research also right now about traumatic brain injury, so this is physical too, and how the buildup of thousands and thousands of minor impacts to the brain over many years can be just as detrimental as that one catastrophic IED. So at ASAP, we build for repetition. 7 weeks, the same 12 people, the same night of the week, and then we want you to come back for another class, and another class, and another class, whatever the art form is that pulls at you. Come to open mics, support other veterans in the community, continue to practice your art in whatever way appeals most to you. We can't offer folks a mountaintop moment at a single retreat or a single mental health workshop. Regardless of our specific solution, we have to build up the dose in the system over time for it to really take effect. And a quick aside, the research is showing that even something like psychedelics, which can have an extraordinary impact in just a couple doses, actually requires enormous work on the front end, in the middle of the process, and on the back end over an extended period of time for those results to make a real and positive difference for someone's life. Next, the family serves too, and supporting veterans and first responders also means supporting their families. Military family members often experience social isolation because of the constant moves and deployment of post-military life. And when it comes time to transition, a lot like their service members, those spouses, they frequently feel a loss of purpose and a loss of social support as well. Representative Wilburn talked about her husband promising to come home every day and the weight that they carried with them because of that as a family, and how when he left the service, it impacted the whole family, not just her husband. Dr. Barber mentioned research on military caregivers by RAND and our friends at the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, and caregivers do indeed face suicidal ideation at 4 times the rate of the general population. Therefore, spouses, caregivers, family members, they take our classes alongside veterans and service members, and we all need to be thinking about it that way too. It's the same class, the same 7 weeks, the same stage. Our members are the ones who actually showed us how important that was. And as a result of that, about 25% of our participants are now military family members, spouses, and caregivers alongside the veterans and service members who we support. Lastly, find complementary partnerships and grow the pie. The Lilly Family School of Philanthropy at Indiana University down the road published the first comprehensive review of charitable giving to military and veteran serving organizations last December. They drew on a decade of IRS data covering every organization that serves this population in the country. All of them together, all of the charitable giving for the military community in the United States of America on an annual basis is 0.67% of charitable giving. 0.67%. I don't know about you, but I would have assumed that such a comfortably bipartisan and patriotic cause would draw more support, but right now it doesn't. We have to work together, all of us in this room across all these different sectors, government, nonprofits, universities, advocacy organizations, and those who lend their voice with large platforms. We all have to work to grow the pie instead of fighting over the pie. For us, that also means strong partnerships with other veteran services organizations that have different strengths than we do. For example, working closely with disabled American veterans, coming into their spaces, installing a mural, hosting a performance at a VFW or a workshop at an American Legion. It means training up arts organizations to serve the military. They want the military to come through their front door. So what are the kinds of community organizations that your work intersects with, and how can you bring the military community through their doors? Because they do want to reach them, they do want to serve them. If you're a military organization, you might actually have the key. This also means strong clinical referral networks, as I said before. We're a community organization, but building up and flexing those clinical connections is so vital to make sure that we're providing this full scope of support that we need to give to the community that we serve. And it's, for us, working. Here's what that's produced so far. ASAP has 10,000 alumni from of our classes all over the country. 3,500 of those were in just the last year alone. So we're growing quickly in our 10 years of history. Those veterans and those military family members are in all 50 states, and we have 6 regional chapters that we focus on all over the country. On average, each of those 3,500 individuals spent 10 hours in our classrooms last year. That does not include the time that they spent up on stage performing, the time that they spent in an audience supporting their fellow ASAPers, the time they spent at home continuing to sharpen their creative skill, or the time they've spent with their friends from the ASAP community outside of our programs. And we know this works because we've studied it. ASAP did an 18-month mixed methods, qualitative and quantitative research evaluation with a control group, a group that was not participating in the program for comparison. And what we learned is that our participants, our graduates, experienced statistically significant and lasting improvements in things like social connection, resilience, self-esteem, decreases in depression and harmful stress. And these results sustain over time, and they deepen with additional participation. For all of us doing this work, it is vital that we evaluate it and make sure that we are putting our money where our mouth is and showing that when we receive charitable dollars, we're actually having the impact that we say we're having. And with that research in hand, it actually makes it a lot more effective for us to build up our work and invite more people into it. As ASAP has continued to grow very quickly, I'm grateful that the magic of the community has retained the same, and folks continue to say they want to return. 99% of our members would recommend us to friends and family, and 95% plan to take another class. We actually often receive multiple applications per spot available, and that's part of why we are working so hard to grow this thing as quickly as we can. So these are some of the shoulders that we stand on, some of the lessons that we take away. Like the soldier shows, we believe that art is vital for our own unit cohesion, morale, and readiness. Like hope, we believe that laughter can turn almost unbearable tears into something bearable, even hopeful. And like Vonnegut, we believe that to practice any art, no matter how well or badly, is a way to make your soul grow. So do it. It took Vonnegut 23 years to be able to tell his story when he finally found the conditions that gave him the space to do it. Those of us in this room can work together to shorten that period for folks like Chris, who is able to take our class, to give them the community that they need, the support they need, the container they need to be able to access these conversations, to process those experiences, and to grow through them. We can't give folks those years back, but we can get them there now, and I think that's the work. So thank you very much. And folks, I think we have a few minutes to turn this into a conversation. So if anyone has a question, there are going to be mics around the room, and you can raise your hand, jump in, and share any thoughts. So take a moment, think about it. If you want to raise your hand, someone will find you, and you can ask a question. And I invite, as you think about it, I invite topics, anything that connects to what we've talked about today, whether it's the funding ecosystem, research and evaluation, program design, the needs of the population, whatever's on your mind, we're open to talk about it.
We have a lot of rural communities in our state, and a lot of our veteran population comes from rural America. Can you talk about how your programming works in an urban center versus a rural area?
It's a fabulous question. So we think about this a lot too. So Indiana is actually ASAP's first state-named chapter. And the reason for that is because we wanted to test and iterate to reach further out of the major metro areas and serve more rural communities. And so we're thinking carefully about how we can get into smaller arts organizations, smaller spaces to reach folks who are in those areas. One of the more effective ways that we personally are able to reach rural veterans and their families is through online programs. And they are shockingly popular. So for online, practically every single program that we offer, we have 5 applications for every spot available. And we have to turn people away constantly. And we see that a lot of these folks are coming from rural areas. We also wanted to make sure when we stood up all of these online programs, are they still having the same impact that the in-person programs were? And we were very surprised to see that the online has equivalent outcomes from resilience, self-esteem, sense of purpose, all of those different things. Even a sense of belonging. The data, it was satisfying that it made sense. There was a little bit less belonging in the online programs, but it was still statistically significant and meaningful. And so those are 2 of the ways that we're thinking about working to reach more rural veterans. Any other folks want to jump in? Coming to you.
Thanks for the presentation today. It was really engaging and I got a lot out of it. So there's the soldier show. What other pieces of it make up ASAP?
So, and what's your name? Thank you, Mary. ASAP arts programs span practically every art form you can think of. And by the way, if you are military connected in this room, you are eligible for our classes. And we've got a substantial presence, again, here in especially central Indiana. But the most popular class is stand-up comedy. That's a 7-week class. You get up and do your Type 5 at the end of the class. Also storytelling, improv, creative writing, acting, drawing, watercolors, glass blowing, woodworking, ceramics, you name it, we probably have a class in it. And also, if there's a particular art form that you're passionate about that you do not see on our website, you can tell our program manager and we will figure out a way probably to make it happen for you. Any other folks? All right. Well, everyone, thank you so very much for your time today. Thank you for your active participation in so many thoughtful conversations today. And thank you to the Indiana Mental Health Roundtable for hosting such a wonderful summit today. Thank you to Sagamore. Really appreciate you. Have a good one.